ghost stories. Do all sorts of ghostly things. Talk local legends. And some ghost hunting. Stories we hope to live to tell. And you have to listen. Who's Ghost Stories? Who's Ghost Stories? We talk Tinker's Hollow to the beast of Delaware Road. Stories we hope to live to tell. And you have to listen. Who's Ghost Stories? Who's Ghost Stories?
Welcome, folks, to another episode of Who's Ghost Stories. As always, I am your beautiful host, Andrew Huzar, Reiki Master and Medium from Huzar Reiki and Readings. With me is the ever-gorgeous cryptid expert, Professor Alex Wheaton. And then we have the very manly, very fine-looking, everyday normal guy, Tyler. Now, we've got a good episode for you today. They're all good. Who are we kidding?
We produce
But
quality.
we do produce quality, and we also produce quality garments. So go ahead
Good save.
to Etsy. That was pretty good, wasn't it? Yeah, off the cuff there. Buy yourself some awesome shirts. We're always designing new ones. Feel free. Even get a hat. I have nice little Who's Our Reiki and Readings hats she got there. You can even get a hat like Tyler. It's not the exact same because he's not wearing one of our hats. It's just the same shape as our hats is what it is.
If we get enough interest in the Mold Man shirt or logo design, we'll make it.
We will make a green Mold Man hat just for you. But yeah, check us out. Paranormal Magazine voted us top 10 before. Do it again. Go subscribe. Get a subscription to them. Also, if you fancy yourself a writer, they do accept article submissions for their website and magazine. So if you like anything we talk about and it gets your wheels a turn into some cool legends and stuff, feel free to shoot them an article. That's nowhere sponsored. That just came out of nowhere. But I think we're ready to dive into this story, which is another one I just learned about. Today's story is one you wouldn't be surprised to see on Unsolved Mysteries. You also wouldn't be surprised if someone told you it was a tragedy written for Broadway. The history strikes multiple tones as it goes from a heartbreaking romance to gruesome mystery. Of course, we wouldn't be talking about it if it didn't take a ghostly turn at some point. We're talking about the ghost of Betty Knox in Dunbar, Pennsylvania. We take a trip backwards in time to 1842 on a small farm at Kentuck Knob on the ridges of the Dunbar Mountains, when Betty Knox was born. Now, the mountain folk were hardy, but there weren't many of them. As such, they didn't have very skilled doctors in the mountains. Betty lost her mother when she was just 3 years old to consumption. Betty's father did his best to raise her, but she didn't have the traditional childhood of a girl. She was taught how to farm and would grow up to take up much of the heavier and harder tasks of the farm. The lifestyle led to her becoming a very strong woman, but she was also incredibly beautiful. All of the men in the area chased after her, but she resisted all of their advances, waiting for someone that she truly loved. Betty helped her father run the farm, plowing the fields, raising livestock, planting, clearing the land, and even doing all of the housework. That is until her 17th birthday, when her father was killed in a freak timber cutting accident. Betty had no other family. She was all alone now. But farming had become her life, and she refused to leave her family's home. She continued to do her normal work, but she had to take up second jobs to help raise some extra money. She would hook her ox up to her wagon and haul grain across the mountains to a grist mill in Ferguson Hollow. Later that night, she would return with and deliver flour to the farmers. The trip was about 25 miles long and took up her entire day. She used the same trail so often that part of it can still be seen today, and Betty Knox Park exists on a piece of land she frequently traveled across. This was her life day in and day out until one fall evening in 1862.
While returning from the gristmill, Betty met the love of her life. She came upon a wounded soldier, a supposed deserter of the Union Army. Betty decided to take him back to her farm and care for him. Desertion was a serious crime, so she was careful to hide him away from any visitors. The soldier stayed with Betty for over a year, and during that time they developed strong feelings for one another. However, he would never fully recover from his wounds. The harsh mountain water didn't help either, and he ended up passing away. Betty buried her young love near her father's grave. Betty began making her daily trips across the mountains again. She became well known amongst all the farmers in the area and won over their respect with her work ethic, but she kept her distance when it came to getting personal. However, sometime in 1878, her daily trips came to a mysterious halt. The local farmers noticed their grain wasn't being picked up, so they thought she had gotten sick. A small posse went to her farm to check on her, but she was nowhere to be found. Betty Knox had disappeared without a trace. A search party was then sent into the woods to search along her usual path. However, no clues turned up. The locals started speculating that she was the victim of a wild animal attack, or perhaps she left out of loneliness. But the mystery rose back to the surface again the following spring when some children went playing in the woods and stumbled on a terrifying discovery. Chained to a tree was the skeleton of an ox. What's weird is that the same spot was searched months prior and there was no skeleton. They believed they found Betty's ox, but stranger yet was the chain. Betty had never used a chain to lead her ox.
Betty Knox was never found, alive or dead. Her body nor her wagon were ever found, only the bones of her beloved ox. To this day, the case remains unsolved, and locals in the area still talk about Betty. Even though Betty was never found, she still makes appearances. Legend has it that if you wander along Betty's path, that you'll see her too, sometimes walking and sometimes driving her wagon and ox. If Betty can't be seen, then you can almost always hear the creaking of an old wooden wagon with hooves clopping on the ground. Many people travel to Betty Knox Park hoping to interact with her spirit. However, that's not the only spirit that can be found there. People add that if you stand in the park quietly, you can hear a man whispering, "Betty Knox, Betty Knox." People believe it's the ghost of the soldier also searching for Betty. The history surrounding Betty is tragic and a complete mystery. We'll never know what actually happened to her. Why was her ox's skeleton chained to the tree so many months later? How could such a strong, resourceful woman just disappear? Is her ghost restless, searching for her long lost lover? Or just merely walking the same path she always loved? For all we know, it could be a mix of all of them.
So, like I said, I just found out about this story, but I think this is another really cool one, especially because there is so much history to it. Like,
hmm
it really does feel like something written for a book or a play. Like a lot of the townsfolk down there around this area do love this story too. So it's not like something that like they're ashamed of or anything. Like it does get a lot of love and respect down there. So like it's cool that also like a town's kind of like rallied around it, but they also compare it to like they say like it's Kentuck Knobs Romeo and Juliet because of the tragic lovers. Um, but like it's so cool to have that blend of like true crime, like oh man, what did happen to Betty Knox, with the ghost part of it in the end. Then, um, another thing I forgot to put it in that still you can see is there was a stream that she would always rest by, and she was the first one to stack rocks around it to make easier drinking water. And apparently, the original rocks that she placed, that path, is where the stream still flows to this day. So there's a lot of reminders of her existence from like the game trails she made, the park they christened, and then like also the stream that she helped direct the flow so she could drink from it. It's all just really cool, and then you get on top of it the mystery and the ghosts, and it's I think it's just a multi-leveled story that just really makes it stick out. So first thing I want to talk about is the ox. So Betty was always known for her ox, and when they searched, they didn't find any remains of her or the ox or the wagon. And then a few months later, remains of an ox are found chained to a tree. Tyler, first instinct, do you think that was Betty's ox?
Yeah, I don't know. But how's a skeleton chained though? You know what I mean? If it's a skeleton, then it's like,
So that's what my first thought was too, because I was like, this sounds like a Looney Tunes cartoon now. Is what I'm
right.
wondering is if it was kind of like the decaying carcass of
Just a
an ox.
that would make more sense, and some bones were peeking through. That makes more
Yeah,
sense.
or like, yeah, is that's kind of what I'm interpreting as, is there was like decaying
Yeah,
remains, and that's what they stumbled upon. Because if it was just bones, like you said, they wouldn't be able to be chained. It would just be like a pile of bones.
right. I don't. I mean, maybe. I mean, in rural Pennsylvania, right? This is in Pennsylvania as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so rural. I mean, rural anywhere in the 1800s. Like, I don't think she's the only one in town with an ox. You know. So I don't know. That's a little. I'm a little skeptic on that part. And also, she went missing. I mean, it was 1878. She might have went to the store and got lost.
Yeah. Anything could have happened.
I mean, not lost, but you know, anything could have happened.
Yeah, up in the mountains especially, like there's
Yeah,
anything could have happened to her.
yeah.
Alex, same question to you. Do you think that was her ox? Or any general thoughts you got to throw in?
I want it to be your ox. So just a general issue with missing person cases, especially the further back you go. So many details are unfinished and unable to be found. I want there to be a happy ending here. um, I did, like you, Andrew, I did not know about this story before. Um, I don't know. I just want I want it to be a happy ending. I'm thinking my logic here, no matter what, is that you don't just chain up an ox.
Right.
You chain it up if you're making a temporary stop and that's your travel, like that's the animal that's traveling with you. If it was chained up, that means that whoever owned it had to leave for something else and never got back, and so that thing starved. So depending on where in the woods, what ate her?
Yeah.
That's my bigger thought here with all this.
And like I think so to me the ox remains is the weirdest part.
Mm-hmm.
Because no
Yeah.
part of the wagon was found near the ox. So if like there were like brigands on the road and they like took her and stole her wagon, why after all these months did they bring a rotting ox carcass back out here? And
Right.
then I was thinking like they could have, I guess, during their search missed the ox, if especially it was winter time. You know, maybe like they weren't able to get the specific area. Like I don't know, like maybe it was there and like now it's just rotting. But like it's just that's such
It's a weird
yeah
piece.
like everything. I don't want to say the whole thing makes sense because, like you said, missing persons, a lot of details not there. Um, like just how does the ox get thrown back into this all of a sudden months later? Um, but yeah, like my first thoughts too were like a wild animal got her, and then it's like, all right, well, someone would have found the wagon, so maybe somebody stole the wagon or kidnapped her, took the wagon, and then there's the thing, maybe she did just up and leave. Like I don't know. There's too many variables because she kept her distance from the people.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't want to get to know them very well.
Mm-hmm.
She was just working
Right.
all the time. Even if she didn't die on the trip, like she could have overworked herself and wouldn't be stretched that something comes, eat her then. I'm talking rural Pennsylvania in the mountains. I already said in a previous episode, wouldn't surprise me if the portal to hell was open in rural PA. At this time we still had probably mountain lions and stuff. So
We still have mountain lions.
bears, like there's a lot of things that could pick her off.
Remember my terrible ex Mary?
Yeah.
One time when I dropped her off at her house, on the way out there was a mountain lion.
Oh,
Yeah. So yeah, they're still
Yeah.
around.
yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of things that could eat her, and there are not so good people that could have did her in. So Alex, you like to fancy yourself a writer.
Mm-hmm.
You got the creativity. This feels like kind of like a perfectly crafted story,
Yes.
like that you would make of somebody.
This is a romance.
Um,
It's tragic.
What are your thoughts on it from the story perspective?
From the story perspective, it's a tragedy. Plain and simple. Like there's nothing else to it. It is a tragic story about individuals who just aren't. They're not meant to be, and they are where they are. So, to me, it's just a good story, and I'm sad to know that she disappeared and was never found. At the same time, though, we continue to find remains of people from centuries past all the time. So there's hope out there that one day she's found, but no guarantee that we're around when it happens.
Yeah, and I've got my own theory here. So I think because all of the stories about her made sure to mention that after her soldier died and she started up the trips, that she did not get to know anybody. Like she didn't make any attachments. So
Right.
I really think that she left. Like she may have been saving up her money, like just get out of Dodge, like get a new farm. Like I think that she left since there was just no trace of her
Right.
wagon or her ox. Like there would be, I really feel like there would be something if she was eaten or robbed. Like you would see signs of something that would give that. And then, it makes you think, well, what about her ghost? So we've talked before about residual energy. If she's traveling this path twice every day, it's not a stretch to think that her energy would imprint that area.
It doesn't matter if she died there or not.
Yeah.
If she spent a majority of her time there, it's going to be there.
And then especially she met the love of her life on that road. If his ghost is there, even after she dies and if she's
He
buried
wants to be
somewhere,
there.
yeah, she could be going back to find him. So I think it is, no matter what ending you think she had, it's still a tragic story.
Yeah.
But I do think there are ways that it's not, she didn't get to live out the rest of her life. She may have, but her ghost and energy could still be in that whole area because of her life. Tyler, what do you think happened to her?
I kind of the more I hear you listen to you guys talk about it, the more I think about it, the more I think she might have just split town. Especially because, like you said, if she would have got, mountain lions are definitely a thing, or were a thing in our part of the country. And I can only imagine, being not as settled in 1878, that, if she was attacked by, say, a mountain lion or, robbed, that there would have been some sort of physical evidence that she's left behind. But now there's a cat again. That I think, yeah, I mean, there's no physical evidence to, think that, she didn't just leave town, looking for love. Maybe, the fact of her one love dying and Kitty, that maybe she was so heartbroken over it, she just left everything behind.
Everything lines up perfectly for that. There's only one monkey wrench in the whole thing. The ox.
That damn ox.
The ox remains chained up. That's a problem. Now, if you separate that from the rest of the story, yeah, I agree. She definitely just left.
Yeah.
And heck, as we specified, it's not sure that it's her ox because she never used a chain.
Right.
That's the piece. The question is, where the hell is that ox from?
Yeah.
That's
That's what I said. I think it might just be, in any rural farmland, she definitely wasn't the only person with an ox. Unless she was, but I don't think that,
And like everything's like it's weird. Like it's kind of cool, and it's also weird. Like whenever you read about Betty Knox or see Betty Knox, like it's always titled like Betty and her ox or Betty Knox and her ox. Like the ox is a part of her.
Yeah.
In the story. So like, you're right though. Like, if she left town, she would need the ox.
She would take it.
She would have to take the ox to get out of town. So she wouldn't just abandon the ox in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, there's something weird about the ox in the woods.
And it's like, if somebody attacked her and stole her wagon, or if she was eaten and somebody took her wagon, like,
they would take the ox too.
Why are they coming back and chaining up the ox?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Like,
that's why I said that's the one. It's the monkey wrench to all this. It doesn't fit anything else.
You already have a mystery, and then you're adding another mystery into it. And in the 1800s, I can totally just buy that, just blowing the people's mind. Like, that wasn't there.
Yeah.
Where did this come from? And, tight-knit community, like, they all know each other. They all know what each other's doing. Like, I would assume one of them would know.
If an ox was missing or something.
Yeah. Or, like, exactly. Like, it's just, where did this ox come from? Why was it chained up? And what the hell happened to Betty? Like,
we're Dunbar, right?
Yeah. Dunbar, Pennsylvania.
Oh, she's got a road named after her.
Yep. Like I said, like, they love her and cherish her. So, like, her memory is kept well alive. And, like, the fact she was so respected amongst the community of farmers, even when she left, they just kept talking about Betty Knox. Betty Knox and her ox. And, like, the one thing, like, I originally thought is, like, what happened to the rest of her livestock. But, like, that kind of resolved itself on its own, because if she was making these trips all day, every day, I could see her selling off the livestock. Or, like, once people realized she was missing, like, I could see them taking her livestock. So, like, I was able to, like, get rid of, like, explain that away. But then still, like Alex said, like, it kept coming back to that ox.
I think so, yeah.
All right, so Tyler, what's your theory on the ox itself?
I don't think it's hers. I don't think it's the Knox ox at all.
Knox
especially,
I like the Knox ox.
Yeah, especially because they said that, she never used a chain. Like, and how was the population of Dunbar, back in 1878? It probably wasn't ginormous, but it probably wasn't, 3 people either.
Maybe
so that
more than the most.
Yeah, right. So I think maybe that, I don't think that it was her ox.
So
something else here on it.
Not her ox. How do you think the ox got there? What's that ox's story in your head?
The potential Knox ox?
The not Knox ox.
The not
Yeah.
Knox ox.
The non-Knox ox. Um,
What's the story behind that ox?
they said a few months later, right?
Yeah,
That,
like springtime came a few months later. Ox was chained up.
yeah, I mean, maybe over the winter, another farmer was. This might just sound ignorant and stupid, but maybe over the winter, a farmer was making a haul somewhere, and he, tied up the ox with his chain, and you know, something happened where he died. Well, but they would have found his body then, right? A few months later, too, if he died.
That's a good
So,
point. They would have found something of him too.
right.
What do you think?
I've been struggling with this because I've been trying to think of logical reasons for this. And one thing I came to was originally I was like, what are the Native American tribes in the area at this time? And of course, by the 1860s, I think like 90% of the Native Americans still living in the United States were west of the Mississippi, so it wasn't very high. But the chaining an ox to a tree, that is a deliberate choice. That's the piece. And I was like, Native Americans wouldn't necessarily chain an ox to a tree. So for me, the story of this not Knox ox,
Where'd you start, Tyler?
I cannot see it as anything other than, and I hate to think of it, but not Betty Knox's, but maybe someone else's who had a sick or injured ox. And this is the time before we had real medical know-how, and veterinarian science was far from being established. And so, what do you do with a sick animal on the farm?
Put it down.
You put it down.
Tie it to a tree.
If you can't, if let's say you have two oxen. Sorry, I'm an English person.
Outside.
Two oxen carrying a load with the farmer, and one ox breaks a limb and cannot walk any further. You can't bring it with you, it's too heavy, but you can't just leave it there to try to wander and cause more problems, so you chain it to a tree and you leave it to die on its own. To me, I think it's a sign that there was a sick or injured ox already, and someone deliberately chose that. And why nobody identified that there was a missing one is because it wasn't missing. It was a sick animal that unfortunately they put down. And that's, to me, that's the only thing that makes sense for why you would chain an ox to a tree.
Yeah.
You don't just chain it for poops and laughs. You do it for a purpose.
Yeah.
So to me, it's
either to leave it or to make sure it doesn't go anywhere while you're gone.
right. It's one of those two options. You're not just, oh, that'd be fun. Let's chain an ox to a tree. No, who does
To
that?
come back in the spring, see how he does.
Yeah. So that's my thought, is that I lean more towards the injured or sick ox that an owner is trying to, as humanely as possible. If it's wintertime, you're hoping it's going to freeze to death rather than starve.
Yeah.
Or be eaten. So you're like, this is the best.
That's definitely the most reasonable.
So, at one point, I was thinking maybe like it was like an ill thought of prank. Like someone had a dead ox, took it up, it was like, oh, Betty Knox ox. But like you said, oxes are heavy. You're not moving an ox that sneakily. But then like I was kind of like running through my head. We have all this history of Betty Knox. We know she existed. We know she was well loved. We know her story. We have all this information. The ox. Could that be the embellishment to the ghost story. Like that, to try to give it that creepy ending of Betty Knox was never found. But months later, they found the skeleton of her ox. Could that, like, could the ox be the part that, like, that really didn't happen and that was the embellishment? It's a weird embellishment, I know, but like it sticks out that we have all of this history on her. She was never found, but then all of a sudden at the end it's just tacked on. They did find this ox skeleton though. So it's like, was it just an ox skeleton that was totally disconnected? Or like over a time is that just part that got added to it?
And if it was part of it, how much of the skeleton was found?
Yeah. Like we said, if it wasn't, you know, decaying corpse, it would be bones, and it could have just been a skull. It could have just been.
And that's, yeah.
I do think the ox is what raised. I mean, obviously, the whole thing raises a lot of questions. What happened to Betty?
But that's
that ox is just like, that's an interesting detail that gets thrown in there at the end, and you know, because like I said, they never found her wagon. There was nothing
Never
else
found
found.
her, yeah.
Like it's just this skeleton was found. So like, you know, like you said, farmer ties it up, totally separate animal. Some like it's tied up there, remains of something. Like I know, like it's like a weird coincidence. Chain could be on the tree, and an animal just dies next to it. What do you think?
Do we know it was an ox?
Now we have no idea.
That's the important piece there as well. The bones of a skeleton of an ox.
I think skeleton's a poor choice of words too.
Yeah.
There's no like over stop. There's no way over the wintertime it goes from a full body to skeleton.
Correct. Yeah, it'd be interesting to know how many bones. Because if it's like a skull and like a rib cage, okay. How do you know it's an ox?
Yeah.
If it's a skull and a rib cage and there's a chain tied around part of the rib cage or something, okay. Is it an ox? And if so, the better question is how bleached are the bones? How, like, and I only know this because my non-biological aunt, my Aunt Carol, who has a farm over in New York State just over the line, she's got a lot of farm and woodland, and there are skulls that she finds of dead animals, and you can usually tell how long something's been dead based off of how bleached the bones are and how there's a lot of things that go into it. So just hearing skeleton and bones makes me go, there's more to it, and I want to know more about the particulars of that ox. And I'm putting it in quotes at this point.
No, that's a very, very good point. And like we could even be looking at a
Impala.
Ibex. General Wayne situation.
Oh.
Where if they're carting bones from animals across the mountain and bones start falling out of the wagon, all of a sudden you've just got piles of bones there. Like you come across in the springtime and you're like, that wasn't there. Well, that's because it wasn't there before. Someone was just carting a pile of bones over the mountain there. And
the chain could have held any number of things. It could have been a marker. Could anything.
Yeah.
Depends on who owned the property.
Yeah. But yeah, I love this story. It's so cool, and just the actual like living story of it is such a tragedy and just a good story. Like it does feel like you're reading a romance novel. And then you get the ghost part on the end, and that's just puts it over the top. Like you've got the ghost of the soldier trying to find her. You've got her spirit walking her path, possibly trying to find the soldier. Just
you got the ox.
Yeah, the ox in the wagon. Like you've the ghost of the ox walking right with her. It's
exactly, because you hear the clop and the old creaky wagon.
Just like Gudgeon at the Gudgeonville Bridge. You've got him clopping over it. You've got the ox Knox.
The Knox ox.
The Knox ox. Trudging along this path. So I think it's really cool. Alex, what are any of your final thoughts here on Betty Knox and the Knox Ox and the Not Ox Ox Knox? Don't even know what I said there.
It's a tragedy through and through, but at the end of the day, if we ever were to visit this area, I feel like very much Gudgeonville Bridge or Dutch and Wintergreen
Tim and
Gorge
Dutch.
Cemetery, Tim and Dutch. I imagine it's more of a peaceful. I don't imagine it's a lot of sorrow
I'd agree.
here. Just personally.
That's a good point. Like if we were to visit there, I think it would be peaceful if we walked her path and stuff. Like we might catch an orb like we did at both places, but you're not going to sense anything.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's going to be a you need to leave here now kind of feeling.
So Tyler, any final thoughts there, and what you think, or even what you would hope to experience if we did trudge out there?
Time to mic mute there for a second. You can't. I think it's a great story. I enjoy the story a lot. I think it's one of those classic old ghost stories. But probably the same thing, much more of a peaceful, kind of maybe a somber type of energy if we were to go visit. But apparently, so I did Google Betty Knox and her non-Knox ox, and apparently we don't have to worry about going to see Betty, hear anything about Betty Knox over there, because an enterprising local claimed to have captured the ghost of Betty Knox in a mason jar and sold it on eBay for $2.51. So, do with that information what you will. Should it sway your travel plans?
Wait. Back up. How much did that sell for?
According to the website, I found $2.51 because $2.50 is just low. It's too low.
So, we will sell pieces of toast that have the images of Jesus in them for thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. But Betty Knox's ghost in a mason jar can't get for $3. If somebody did catch her ghost and then sell it on eBay, that is very disrespectful.
Right?
I hope whoever she ended up with also had the ghost of her ox in a jar. At the very least.
Yeah. Someone should start selling like chicken wing bones and claiming it's like the bones of the non-Knox ox.
Ooh.
Utterly ridiculous. But yeah, as Alex is finding out, they do like to sell ghosts and jars and demons in boxes on eBay.
the hell?
For a lot more than $2.51.
Plus, it's disrespectful.
Someone got a steal when they got hers. I'm gonna try to go down to Dunbar, Pennsylvania one day, and I'm gonna try to do a seance, and I'm gonna see if someone actually did capture her, or if she's, back down there. No. But I think that does it for this one. Like I said, I echo both their sentiments. Great story. Awesome history. Tragic, and the ghost part's even better. I love it. I think this is going to become one of my favorite ones. We're going to try to deal with the whole ghost in the jar on eBay thing, but for now, this has been the Paranormal Cowboy. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and stay in the light.